Chapter 10. Kusko Owl. The first sound Amuro heard was that of someone chuckling. It seemed to continue forever, but he could also make out the words, "You mean the kid?" He had no idea what was so funny, but in the process of trying to figure it out he began to regain consciousness. It helped, perhaps, that the voice belonged to a woman. It had a rather suggestive sound, and was infinitely more pleasant than the gruff tone of the man who interrupted her. His words were hard to understand, and merely part of a whispered conversation in the darkness. "Why not?" said the woman, giggling but using a different tone. "Don't you think he's kinda cute? Because we have rules against it." The man seemed to be cautioning the woman against something. Amuro tried to open his eyes, and watched a light fixture directly above him gradually come into focus. It was a type of light he had seen a lot of in the last 2 years, a fluorescent panel covered with the protective mesh favored on military spacecraft. "I wonder if this is a military ship," he thought, as his conscious mind began to reassert itself. He blinked several times. Aware of a woman's presence, he felt a little shy, but he wanted to know where he was. He tried moving his body for the first time, and a face peered down at him, blocking the light. "Can you hear me?" The voice that sprang from the lips was bright and unaffected. "Yes," he answered hoarsely. For a moment he wondered why he had replied so readily. He had no way of even knowing, after all, if the woman was from the Earth Federation. But any resistance faded with the sight of her smile. "You've been asleep a long time," she said. "But you should be all right now. It must have been rough." Then, turning from Amuro, she called for a doctor. Amuro liked the way her jaw looked when she spoke. She turned back toward him again. "Understand everything I say? My name's Kusko Owl. Kusko Owl. You're on the Cassetta Third." "Kusko Owl. Are you the one who rescued me?" "Well, quite frankly, Ensign," she said with a toss of her long chestnut hair, "I don't know if rescue is the right word or not. Our transport just happened to be the first to spot you, that's all." "Thanks. I think I'm getting sleepy again." "You should rest then, Ensign. You're safe now." Amuro began sliding into sleep once more, but before losing all consciousness, he heard a doctor enter the room and exchange words with Kusko Owl. Because he's an officer in the Federation forces, the way it was said gave Amuro a vague sense of unease, but he trusted his own instincts. He detected no basic danger. And then he blacked out. Later, Amuro would remember only a dream of his mother, Kamari Ore. She was still living near his old home on Earth, but the war had involved her too. She was lying naked in bed, wearing a Red Cross armband, next to a man he had never seen. Amuro, wearing his pilot suit, was standing and staring at both of them. He felt strangely dispassionate, but since his mother was married to his father, he wondered why she felt no shame. "You shouldn't wear a cross on your bare arm like that, Mother," he said. "It doesn't seem right somehow." His mother's eyes showed no sign of anger, but her lips formed a little smile that seemed to say he was an unwelcome interruption. "It's your life to do as you please, Mother. But you ought to listen to your son once in a..." While he turned from her and the man, and began walking away. His pilot's suit seemed heavier than ever. His boots had lead in their soles, and with each step they felt heavier and heavier. 5, 6, 7 steps, 12, 13. When he reached 23, he was no longer able to raise his feet off the ground. And then it happened. From his mother's bed in the shadows behind him came a scolding voice. "What an ungrateful child you are. I didn't raise you to talk like that to me." "What do you mean by raise, Mother? You didn't raise me. Even Dad was too busy with his work to raise me. I raised myself." Amuro was not really sad when he said it, but he wept anyway. Then he was hundreds of kilometers away from his mother, but she came running naked after him, her hair all disheveled. "Don't come near me," he yelled, trying to flee. "You're unclean." He began running again, but the more he ran, the more leaden his feet became. He donned his pilot helmet and activated the sun visor in an attempt to block out all sight of her, but when he did, the sound of his labored breathing became a roar in his ears. "Help! Help! I can't breathe!" he screamed, groping desperately with both hands at the surroundings he could no longer see. Then someone's hand took his. It was warm, and he somehow knew it belonged to the blonde communications recruit who had been with him on the Pegasus. "Sayla, is that you?" he asked. "Ensign! Ensign!" At the sound of the words, Amuro's eyelids fluttered open. It was not Sela, but Kusko Al. His guard instinctively up. He cursed himself for having fallen asleep again, without verifying his rescuer's real identity. "Thanks," he said, smiling. "I feel better now." At Amuro's confident reply, Kusko Al tossed her long chestnut hair again and smiled. But Amuro detected another, wavering thought behind her surface expression and sensed danger. She responded to him too quickly, too precisely, as if she already knew too much about him. "What am I feeling?" His mind began groping for an answer, but he tried to tone down his impulses. He would have to be careful. He knew nothing about her, and it would be better to feign ignorance if there were a threat. "I was dreaming," he said. "It was frightening, and it was obscene." Obscene? Her pretty gray eyes narrowed as she stared down at him. It worked, he exulted. The word obscene, with all its physical implications, had caught her off guard. He had pierced her emotional barriers and aroused her basic feminine curiosity. "My mother was sleeping with another man," he said. Kusko Al was at a loss for words. The peach-fuzzed, innocent-looking young ensign in front of her was certainly not yet 20, yet he spoke in a self-confident manner that belied his youth. No ordinary Federation pilot would speak in such casual terms about his mother to a virtual stranger. He was either an utter fool or— "You've been through some hard times, Ensign," Kusko said. "You'd better forget the nightmares. Thanks. I'd like to speak to the ship's captain if I may. Would you call him for me?" With the aid of the doctor, Amuro checked himself, going from the top of his head down his neck and back to his tailbone. He was all in one piece and he felt no pain. For a moment he wondered if his memory was intact, but then he remembered what he wished he could forget, the entire battle on Texas. What of his fellow crew members on the Pegasus? What had happened to them? It was too painful to think further, so he brought his attention back to Kusko, in front of him. She put down an intercom phone and turned to him. "The captain will be here to see you any moment, Ensign." "Thanks, I appreciate it." He gingerly raised himself up on his elbows. Luckily, the Caseta's artificial gravity was only 1/3 that of Earth, for when he moved he felt enormous fatigue throughout his body, especially in his joints. He had worn his pilot suit too long. "Where's this ship headed?" he asked. "Side 6. We're scheduled to dock at Balda Bay, but be careful when you move like that. You okay?" He could not tell if the concern expressed was real or merely a technique to get him to let down his guard, but the tone of her voice had suddenly changed. "I'm fine. It wasn't a direct hit. By the way, what happened to my capsule?" "Your capsule? You mean that thing that looks like a light plane? It's moored on the ship's deck." Amuro said nothing. He knew he had made a major mistake in letting them get hold of his core fighter intact. He had referred to it as a capsule because he did not yet know who Kusko Al really was and needed to hide its true function from her. The escape capsule was far more than it seemed. It could operate as the Gundam's cockpit module, but when configured independently, the dozens of vernier jets on the wing-like protrusions on its top, bottom, and sides made it highly maneuverable. It was called a core fighter because it could also function as a fighter. The problem was that there were several exposed joints on its external skin, joints that connected it to the Gundam's control system. An expert seeing those joints would instantly realize what the capsule's function really was. An unknown ship picked me up while I was unconscious. For Amuro, the unthinkable had happened. What would he do if his rescuers were really flying a Xeon flag and his core fighter had already fallen into enemy hands? As Amuro watched, the door to the room opened, and in walked an older man, with deep wrinkles around his eyes. The gold braid on his uniform suited him well and implied that he was the ship's captain. He was followed by another man in his mid-30s who appeared to be some sort of aide. While pondering the second man's role, Amuro stood up and saluted and noted for the first time the pain in this right upper arm. "Ensign Amuro Ray, of the Earth Federation Force's 13th Autonomous Corps. Thanks for rescuing me. You're more than welcome, Ensign. I'm Famira Ashul, the skipper of this ship, and this is Isfahan, my aide." While nodding in greeting to both of them, Amuro indicated with his eyes to the captain that Kusko should leave. A perceptive man who seemed to be aware of the ways of the world, he immediately understood. "Kusko," he asked, Would you mind leaving us alone for a minute? With a smile in Amuro's direction, she left. Amuro addressed the captain. I have 2 questions, sir. Fire away, Ensign. First, I need to dispose of the escape capsule you found me in. Can you do it for me? Second, what is to become of me? Relax, Ensign. Since your capsule is already tethered to the deck of the cassetta, we cannot unfortunately allow you to dispose of it yourself. But the cassetta's registered to Side 6, so when we arrive, your capsule will be handled according to the terms of the Neutrality Act that Side 6 has signed with the Earth Federation. That means that after going through immigration inspection at Balda Bay, it will be turned over to the Federation Consulate. As for yourself, we'll hand you over to the Federation Consulate too. That creates a problem for me, Captain. Well, I'm sorry, Ensign, but regulations are regulations. Had you first abandoned your capsule and then requested rescue, the means of disposal would be your prerogative. But at this point, the capsule is technically our cargo. How do you have it tethered? Shall I show you, Ensign? Captain Famira, the aide, ventured, are you sure it's all right? The ensign used to own the capsule, the captain snapped. We have no reason to refuse his request. Then, to Amuro, think you can walk? Lift grips were used in weightless areas of the Cassetta 30 to transport crew members. Handholds moving on guide rails built into the ship's walls. They could transport a single person at speeds of 2 to 7 meters per second, but it took quite a knack to use them. One had to start swimming horizontally parallel to the grips and then grab onto one with the right arm to be pulled along. In places where there was a break in the guide rails, transfers were tricky. It was necessary to slow down 2 or 3 meters in advance, minimize all inertial movement, and then, after double-checking the position of the next grip to be grabbed, make the body swim straight toward it through the air. Accidentally bending a knee would create a different movement vector and make the connection impossible. Amuro hadn't used a lift grip for weeks. He grabbed a 3rd grip after Captain Famira, following Isfahan the aide and Kusko Al. For the first time, he noticed Kusko's shapely figure. She was wearing denim pants and turned and smiled broadly at him. You can see your capsule out the hatch window over there, Ensign, Captain Famira said. Amuro's view was blocked by the captain's enormous rear end in front of him, but he took his hand off the grip and let himself float up by the man's left side. Sure enough, through the 30-centimeter square hatch window, he could see the expanse of the ship's upper deck, and on the starboard side, his core fighter tethered with wire cables. The canopy was bent, and the right wing had almost been destroyed. The fuselage seemed to have cracks in it. While checking his craft visually through the narrow window, Amuro also scanned as much of the Cassetta's outer deck as he could. In the shadow of a container on the left side of the deck, he saw several people dressed in normal suits, the term used to describe spacesuits ever since mobile suits had been developed. Since the ship was a transport soon to dock at Side 6, there was nothing intrinsically odd about a few workers outside, but the fact that there were so many of them, and that they were in the same area of the deck where his core fighter was tethered confirmed his worst fears. They were either Zeon military men or somehow connected to the enemy, he concluded, and one of them might already have entered his core fighter cockpit. Pretending to be greatly relieved, Amuro turned to Famira and smiled broadly. I can't thank you enough, Captain. I can't tell you what it means to me to be able to tell my superiors in the Federation that my capsule's right next to me. Well, I frankly feel as relieved as you do, Ensign. As soon as we disembark on Balda Bay, someone from the Federation forces normally comes to interrogate us. It'll make it a lot easier for me if someone like yourself can vouch for us. Amuro smiled in response. If the Federation consulate requests it, the captain continued, I'm sure Side 6 will turn over your capsule right away. How long does it normally take to clear customs on Side 6? With luck, 2 days. Without it, 5 days to a week. You've got to be prepared for the worst. Bureaucrats are the same all over the solar system. Amuro gazed out the hatch window again, and over the ship's prow he saw 2 bright lights in space in the distance. They were clearly Side 6 colonies, and one, he deduced, must function as a port, Balda Bay. A military ship could reach it in 15 minutes, but the Cassetta was a transport and would take another 2 hours. Take a look at this monitor, Ensign, Kusko said, pointing at a screen next to her. Like most spaceships, the transport had remote-control external security cameras monitoring its outside decks, giving Amuro an even better look at his core fighter. The system worked well, and the screen showed a high-resolution view of the core fighter from above. When the cameras zoomed in for a close-up, shadows cast by the blazing sun were displayed with a proper exposure, and even details such as individual welds in the armor plating were clearly visible. Thankfully, there were no normal suited shapes meddling in the cockpit, but he sensed that not all was well. He commented with veiled sarcasm, "The cassette is certainly well equipped to handle my capsule." Isfahan's eyes flashed angrily, and he knew the nuance behind his remark had registered. He looked back at the screen. As a neutral territory aligned with neither the Earth Federation nor the Principality of Zeon, Side 6 had been spared the ravages of the war, but its government leaned heavily toward Zeon. Its president, Rank Kiprodon, was widely rumored to be collaborating with Kycilia Zabi. Amuro sensed, moreover, that the Cassetta III was in the enemy camp, and he also sensed that were it not for Captain Famira's personal goodwill toward him, he would certainly have been treated as a prisoner of war. But where, he wondered, did Kusko fit into all this? "Thanks for your help," Amuro said to the captain. Then he started to grab onto a lift grip. He knew the aide was secretly laughing at him, so he deliberately turned to Kusko and said, "Mind telling me where I can get some coffee around here?" "If you'd like," she said flirtatiously. "I'll bring some to you in your quarters, Ensign. You would? Sure, you mind?" The conversation was a ploy. Amuro had asked Kusko because he wanted Isfahan to think he was personally attracted to her, and the strategy seemed to work. Isfahan smiled a thin smile as if to say, "Good luck, sucker." But what really surprised Amuro was that although he had decided to use Kusko as a diversion, she seemed to have sensed his intention, and even tried to help him. For a second he wondered if she might be a new type. Unlike Lala Sun and Shar Aznable, he felt no spark of intuitive understanding with her. "I'll just have to see what develops and act as naturally as possible," he thought, resolving to keep his guard up. As a cargo ship, the Cassetta III had a rather rudimentary self-service mess hall with about 20 tables. A large counter protruded from the kitchen to the hall, with trays and utensils piled on it. Coffee was served from a coin-operated vending machine stuck against the far wall near the counter. "Well, what'll it be?" Kusko asked. "How about some mocha mandarin-flavored espresso?" Amuro asked, looking up at her bright, gray-tinted eyes. She was a tad taller than he was. "Let's not be too picky, Ensign," she bantered as she deftly filled 2 cups. After moving over to a table beside the vending machine and sitting down, he asked her, "Do you understand my situation?" "No, not totally, but the worried look on your face gave me a pretty good idea of what's going on. One thing's for sure, you'd never make a good spy." Amuro chuckled and took a sip of some of the worst coffee he had ever experienced. "I have to get my capsule off the Cassetta III, Kusko," he said. "If it's inspected on Side 6, my neck's on the line." "That's what I thought, but if you're going to do something, you'd better hurry. We're docking at Side 6 soon. Want me to help you, Ensign?" She looked straight at him when she said this, and her gray eyes flashed. She had the ability to establish rapport instantly with men, and the positive first impression she gave off must have unhinged more than a few. What was it about her, Amuro wondered, that enabled her to do that? Perhaps, he thought, it was her absolute confidence in her own femininity. Several minutes later, they were standing in front of a desk manned by the crewman in charge of the ship's normal suit locker. Kusko turned and deliberately said to Amuro, "I feel like taking a walk. Want to join me for a look at the Side 6 colonies from outside the ship? We dock in 30 minutes, so we have to be back inside within 10. Then, turning to the young crewman and keeping a straight face, she said, "We just want to take a souvenir photo. No problem, right?" Sure enough, after cautioning them to observe the time limit strictly, he handed over 2 normal suits. From deck of the Cassetta III, Amuro could clearly see all 8 colonies that constituted Side 6. Balda Bay, the main one, was one of the largest structures ever created by man. Its enormous cylinder, with giant reflecting mirrors unfolding on 3 sides, slowly rotated in space and was home to over 10 million people. He could already make out a string of lights around the colony much like those of an Earth city at night, and he knew he was looking at the colony. Industrial Zone. Each light represented a module positioned around the port area that was used for the repair and the maintenance of ships and for the manufacture of goods. Since he had been raised in space, there was nothing particularly remarkable about the site for him. His immediate concern was to find some way to dispose of his core fighter. He walked several paces forward, hugging the shadow cast by one of the cargo containers lined up on the ship's deck. No one on the bridge could see him directly, but he also wanted to avoid anyone who still might be trying to snoop around his fighter. Kusko Al put her helmet to his to initiate skin talk, the low-tech form of communication preferred by normal-suited people in space, which relied on transmitted voice vibrations. "Relax," she said. "There's no one else here." Already sensing the same thing, he kicked off from the deck. In the weightless environment, his body floated in a straight line away from the direction of the kick, toward his goal, the core fighter cockpit canopy. Reaching it, he opened an emergency hatch under its frame and yanked on a lever. The entire canopy popped open, and just as he had feared, he saw that someone had removed the self-destruct explosive charge under the seat. "Damn Xeon spies," he cursed. Hastily, he opened a cover on the back of the attitude control computer module behind the seat. What looked like part of the computer was really a dummy box stuffed with a full complement of emergency explosives, ones that could be used for everything from flares to demolition. He proceeded to attach 3 units of explosives to the cables tethering the core fighter to the Casetta's deck, and then started walking backward away from the fighter, unraveling a remote control wire that terminated in a pull-ring safety switch. And then it happened. A searchlight stabbed out at him. Although an alarm probably sounded inside the ship, out in space he couldn't hear it. Instead, the wide-range receiver headset inside his normal suit helmet suddenly picked up the overlapping sounds of several voices barking, "Who goes there? Don't move." But it was too late. Amuro pulled the pin on the switch, and with a flash, the cables restraining the core fighter were blown apart, allowing it to drift slowly off into space. Kicking off the Casetta's deck, Amuro propelled his body toward the container where Kusko Al was hiding, and as soon as he reached cover, the fuselage of the core fighter suddenly swelled around the canopy, and then, boom, exploded. Fragments rained down on the deck of the Casetta, showering several normal-suited crewmen who had dashed out of the bridge area in panic. When Amuro put his helmet next to Kusko's, he couldn't see her expression because of her sun visor, but he clearly heard her say, "Congratulations, Ensign." "Thanks. Now I don't have to worry so much. I'm happy for you." To tell you the truth, it was kind of exciting, but now comes the hard part. It was my capsule, and I had a right to do what I wanted with it. He felt her rest, the left arm of her normal suit on his shoulder. He couldn't see her expression, but he sensed there was some underlying emotion accompanying it, one that he could only guess at. "Tell me, why'd you help me?" he probed. She answered, but not before laughing suggestively with the same tone he remembered hearing when he had first regained consciousness on the Casetta. "Because you're cute," she said. It was the last thing in the world he had expected to hear from her. She was clearly no Lala son. Brushing her arm off his shoulder, he stood up. Some of the Casetta crew members were already running over. "Please go in, Commander," said the round-faced secretary with the charming smile outside Kisilia Zabi's office, Onabaoku. Char stood up, wearing a brand-new red uniform delivered only 2 hours earlier. Save for the fact that it was a little tight around his chest, it was quite acceptable. Given that it had been made by military tailors on a frontline base, it was nearly perfect. He turned his head to see how the collar fit. "It suits you very well, sir," the secretary remarked. She seemed unusually interested in the masked officer. Just before Char stepped inside Casilia's room, another officer exited. He hissed audibly as he passed by, saying, "So it's the masked young hotshot again," and Char made a mental note to remember him. Through the open door he could see Casilia standing with her back to him, admiring her tropical fish. An aquarium 1 meter tall by 3 meters wide held several varieties, but a school of red swordtails dominated the whole tank, their scales flashing in the light. "You must be tired, Commander," Casilia said as he entered. He walked directly over to a chair in front of her desk, As always, he kept his mask on. Ostensibly, it was to hide the disfiguring scar on his forehead and to protect his eyes. But he had an additional reason to wear it in front of her. He was afraid of being recognized because his foster father, Jim Baral, had often told him that when he was an infant, Jaren, Dozel, and Kycilia Zabi used to play with him. Enough time had elapsed so that he was probably safe. But he knew that if he suddenly changed an old habit, it would only serve to arouse Kycilia's suspicions. "I read the combat report on the Elmeth," Kycilia said. "Both you and many of the Zanzibar crew were lucky to get out of Texas alive. It's thanks to the people who built the colony, Excellency. It took quite a beating before it blew." Kycilia moved away from her aquarium. "It's too bad the Zeon patrol ships in the area weren't doing their duty," she grumbled. "Or we could have rendezvoused earlier." "It's too bad Granada didn't hold out a half-day more," he replied. "If it had, I could have joined you in the fight." Just before the Texas colony had exploded, he and several other Zanzibar crew members had escaped in launches and been picked up by a Musai-class Cosmo cruiser in the area on its way to participate in the defense of Granada. But on learning of the premature collapse of the base defenses, the cruiser had changed course. Making a broad detour around the moon, it had instead headed for Zeon's Abawaku space fortress, arriving only the night before. Abawaku shared the same gravity-neutral Lagrange point as Side 3, which held the Principality of Zeon. Constructed of two giant asteroids that had been transported from a remote belt, fused together and fortified, it had the unique profile of an umbrella and was sometimes affectionately referred to as such. With Solomon, another man-made space fortress orbiting around Lagrange Point 5, it formed Zeon's main line of defense. After fleeing Granada, Kycilia had managed to reach Abawaku, obtain the use of part of it for herself and her surviving troops, and immediately begin reforming her forces. "So, you're another one who thinks we should have held out longer," Kycilia said bitterly. Shar was at a loss for words. He fully understood her frustration. If only Abawaku had been able to spare some of its forces, Granada might have been saved. The implication was clear. Giran, the supreme commander of the Zeon forces, had conspired with Dozel and deliberately refrained from mobilizing to help her. Rumor had it that Giran was secretly trying to isolate Kycilia, but that she had learned of his plans early, and thus had deliberately fled Granada before it fell, rather than defending it to the end. On seeing Kycilia's reaction to his statement, Shar sensed that the rumor was indeed true, and if so, the Zabi ruling family was in even greater disarray than he had imagined. With luck, he thought, it might eventually collapse without his lifting a hand against it. "It's the sort of thing that can't be helped, Excellency," he said, as if to console her. It was such an obvious statement that Kycilia laughed bitterly. "I just can't believe the way they treat us like such outsiders here at Abawaku," she said. "And it's not like Dozel, but something's making him act awfully nervous, too." Abawaku was under the direct jurisdiction of Giran Zabi, not Kycilia. Dozel Zabi had come from Solomon to Abawaku to attend a reorganization meeting held the day before. "And how is the plan to reform your forces proceeding, Excellency?" Shar asked. So. My dear brother Giran isn't easy on defeated commanders, but I'll show him. I've decided to form a new type corps." Shar suddenly felt uneasy. Kycilia was acting impetuously. "A new type corps?" he asked. "Giran may be Supreme Commander, but he has no idea of what's really happening here on the front lines. All he thinks about is what he's going to do after we win the war." "He's very confident, I'm sure," Shar said, empathizing. "But do you really think the new strategy he's devised will work?" Kycilia looked both puzzled and shocked. "I've heard it said," Shar continued, "that he plans to lure the Federation forces to a point directly between Solomon and Abawaku and destroy them in a single strike." "Are you talking about the system plan?" Kycilia's words suddenly had a hard edge to them. Yes. Garma told you about that?" Kycilia's younger brother, Garma Zabi, Shar's former classmate at the Zeon Officer Academy, had recently been killed in action. "I leave that to your imagination, Excellency. But I don't think the Supreme Commander's goal is moving any closer to reality. I quite agree. Nor does it seem likely that one single system plan would be enough to end the war. We might succeed in annihilating most of the Federation forces, but still not be able to alter the course of history in favor of the Zabi family. I say that because I've heard that the Earth Federation forces already have a new type unit of their own. I'm of the opinion that the coming age may belong to new types. Don't you agree, Commander? Char was temporarily at a loss for an answer, since directly confirming the existence of new type individuals, though Lala's son, he was no longer cooperating with Kycilia simply out of revenge and a desire to destroy the Zabi family. He was in fact in utter agreement with her comment about the next age belonging to new types. Making it come true had become his personal goal and ideology, but for different reasons. History clearly showed, he knew, that ordinary people were capable of resolving serious disputes only through war. New types held out new possibilities. He answered slowly, a new type age. Yes, I think I can agree with that. What he meant and what Kycilia was thinking were totally different, but that was not his concern. It was currently in his interest to use Kycilia and the Flanagan agency she controlled. It was to his advantage to go along with her for the time being. I thought you would, she said. That's why it's imperative for us to form a new type corps as soon as possible. I understand, Excellency, but I thought Ensign Lala's son was the only true new type we had available. Don't worry, I didn't pour all that money into the Flanagan agency for nothing. It just so happened that when you visited them, you only encountered the girl. In reality, they have other new type troops fully capable of operating in combat situations. Kycilia pressed a button on the intercom on her desk and asked her secretary to send in Commander Garcia Dowell of the Flanagan agency. Then she stood up. I understand you were on extremely good terms with Ensign Lala's son, Excellency. Just like a woman, Char thought. She would have to bring up just what he did not want to hear. I was a little carried away by my youth, I suppose, he said in self-deprecation. Youthful ardor and kindness, Commander Char. The very qualities which suit you least as a professional soldier. He replied with a wry smile that was forced. He recalled Lala and how, from the very beginning, he had never really thought of her as a military person. How, through a series of coincidences, she had accidentally encountered the pilot of the Federation mobile suit, Amuro Ray, and how her mind had reached a mysterious harmony with his even in the middle of a duel to the death. Had she not been doomed, Char knew her consciousness would have fused with that of the young mobile suit pilot and reached even higher levels. The memory made him jealous. Maybe, he thought, it was a good thing she had been killed. But he was also man enough to realize that if she truly represented the new types people had long talked about, there might indeed be hope for mankind. Lala Sun and Amuro Ray had transcended normal love between men and women. Their fused awareness had expanded and strengthened into a type of universal wisdom. It held out the potential of a unification and purification of human desire and intelligence, all at the same time. If only, he thought, it could happen to everyone. Commander Garcia Dowell was explaining to Kycilia, Lieutenant Chalia Bull commands a fleet of ships that transport helium-3 from Jupiter. When he returned to the fatherland 2 weeks ago, we had him investigated. He appears to be extremely promising. But why? Char asked, swirling the ice cubes in a glass of scotch an aide had handed him. Would a man of his caliber have been employed away from the front lines? Perhaps it's some sort of prescience unique to new types. Perhaps someone thought he could cause problems at the front. Garcia flipped through the file he held and began to read another page, but Char stopped him. Don't. You think it's a little odd that the Flanagan agency, you, would somehow manage to select someone like him out of all the others considered for investigation? Chalia Bull? Why, he came to my group on the direct recommendation of Supreme Commander Giran Zabi. Char was stunned. If, as he understood, Kycilia thought that forming a new type unit was exclusively her idea, here was Giran directly sending his own new type candidate, and one who happened to be one of the most promising so far, as if to warn her. He didn't know what to say. Garcia continued reading aloud from his file. And then we have junior grade Lieutenant Kramer Corella. He's a former Zaku pilot. When Garcia finished, Char asked, and is he at exactly the same level as Chalia Bull? Suddenly serious, Garcia answered, yes, the same as I mentioned earlier. But then there's also junior grade Lieutenant Kusko Al. She has such extraordinary abilities that the Flanagan Agency claims they had to put together special tests just for her. They even took her to Earth at great risk this week to see if any changes would occur in new type brainwave patterns under the influence of normal gravity. To Africa, right? I heard about that. Tell us the result. We haven't received any information yet, but we should have a communication today. And where is this Kusko Al now? She should be at Balda Bay, on Side 6. Side 6 had an artificially created temperate climate. Some aspects of having 4 delineated seasons were inconvenient, but the rank administration believed that people needed the stimulation. There were no annual rainy seasons or typhoons designed into the climate patterns, but heavy rains and snow were randomly scheduled every 5 years or so. It was a humble attempt on the part of humans to approximate the natural environment of their home planet. The first day Amuro visited the Earth Federation consulate on Side 6, a Lieutenant List Hayashida offered him coffee and strawberry shortcake. One of 20 military attaches assigned to the consulate, List had been instructed to gather information, and he was more than willing to fill Amuro in on the details of the colony. "We had a flood here once," List said. "I think it was in June the year before last. 20 houses were swamped. It even became a political problem. Houses swamped. It was an utterly alien notion to Amuro. Sure, even on Earth it never happens anymore. Rivers overflow their banks, and water inundates the houses. Really. But it doesn't affect me. I've got a great life here. All I have to do is check on the people who visit the Flanagan Agency. Every day I spend about 4 hours monitoring the agency entrance, compiling names and taking photographs of those who go in and out. Then I send the info to General Headquarters at Jaburo on Earth. That's it. What's the Flanagan Agency? You don't know? I didn't realize you were that green, son. It's where the Zeon forces train their new types. Surely you've heard of new types. But I thought Side 6 was neutral." Amuro stabbed a strawberry with his fork and popped it into his mouth. "That's a violation of international law, isn't it? Ha! Where have you been? Welcome to the real world. You can't be blamed for your ignorance, though, I suppose. They put you lads into the force before you've even had the chance to chase a few skirts." Picking up another piece of shortcake, Amuro weakly countered. "My superior officer used to say the same thing, but frankly, I don't think experience with the opposite sex has anything to do with it. Seems like an awfully jaded way to look at things. You know, I'll bet you drive some women out of their minds. You're the good-looking, innocent type of kid they just love to mother to death. But enough of that." List had apparently concluded that Amuro was something of an idiot. He took a gulp of coffee and stared out the consulate window at the colony's expanse of artificial hills and greenery. "The ways of the world," he continued. "Let me tell you something. When I leave the consulate, I put on a disguise. Sometimes I wear a fake beard. But someone from the Zeon side always tails me and watches when I photograph things from hotel windows or gather information at coffee shops. And when my 4 hours of work are over, the Zeon spy follows me back to the consulate. He works longer hours than I do. Understand? That's what being a spy is all about. Seems a little devious, but that's the way the real world is. I've never had a gun battle with an enemy spy or anything exciting like that. That stuff only happens in the movies." Amuro nodded and sipped his coffee. On arriving at Balda Bay, Amuro had at first been suspected of sabotaging the core fighter carried on the Cassetta III. He had expected a rough time with immigration and customs, but then had been pleasantly surprised. As expected, Lieutenant List Hayashida, as a representative of the Federation consulate, had gone to bat for him. But so had Kusko Al. She, in fact, had turned out to be his biggest ally of all, speaking vigorously in his defense and even creating an alibi for him, testifying that he had been in her room when the core fighter had exploded. When the immigration officer had asked Amuro point-blank if her statement was true, he had of course replied in the affirmative. It was an outrageous lie, but her stubborn adherence to her story proved pivotal. It also enraged Isfahan, the aide on the Cassetta. "She was sleeping with an officer from the Earth Federation," he exclaimed. Lieutenant List Hayashida initially took the story at face value, but as befitted an intelligence officer, he eventually realized that Amuro was for all intents still a babe in the woods when it came to women. He had no idea of what had really happened between Amuro and Kusko. It was a mystery to him, but it was not his main concern. He had been specially commanded by General Revel, who had just occupied Zeon's Granada moon base, to take good care of the young ensign. Amuro stared at the bluish tone of List's freshly shaved chin and decided to change the subject. "May I assume I can return to my unit soon?" "Sure," the lieutenant muttered, pulling a photograph from his vest pocket and tossing it down on the table between them. "But take a look at this first." Amuro was stunned by what he saw. It showed Kusko, of all people, running up a flight of imitation stone steps. She seemed to be looking at the camera. Her full lips were formed in a smile. "This isn't a one-time thing, pal. I wouldn't show it to you unless I knew what I was talking about. I saw her enter the agency 3 times, and just to make sure, since I've only been on the job here for a little over a month, I even checked my predecessor's records. Except for the last 10 days, she's been visiting the Flanagan agency almost daily for over 6 months. She's officially on the staff of the agency, but she's not a regular employee. She's a new type." "You must be kidding," a shocked Amuro whispered, picking up the photo and scrutinizing it. "Is this building the Flanagan agency? Hey, the photograph is yours. Use it for a reference." I didn't know," the lieutenant smiled weakly. Amuro looked up at him. "So tell me," List said, "what's a core fighter?" "It's an escape capsule for a mobile suit. It contains the entire cockpit of a GM suit?" "Yes, something stinks here, Ensign." "What do you mean?" "Listen, don't take it personally, but from my perspective, you don't know zip about the ways of the world. There's something I don't understand going on here. I don't think you're leveling with me." Really? You probably want to say something about me being a new type, but I'm not. I haven't had any special training at all." "Well, how come I received a direct order from General Revel concerning you? I even heard your name from the immigration office. Ordinarily, Federation military personnel are just checked for their identity and the unit they're attached to and then cleared. All I usually do is greet them at the port area. Don't you think it's a little odd Revel would personally order me to look out for you? Maybe it's because my unit was annihilated on Texas. Listen, don't play me for a fool, kid." List was getting visibly angry. "No, it's true. I don't have any of the traits associated with new types, and even if someone told me I was one, I wouldn't believe them. But..." Amuro seemed suddenly to recall something. "But what if I were?" List stood up and informed Amuro that a Federation transport was scheduled to depart from Balda Bay the next morning at 5. Then he announced, "Kusko a new type. Her ID number's J60-159. She'll leave the Flanagan agency at 6 tonight and return to her quarters." Amuro smiled and said, "Really? Thanks for the information." It dawned on him that he was being set up. The Flanagan agency had an official-sounding name, but it was housed in a nondescript building identified only by a worn, scarcely legible nameplate at the entrance. In front of the building there was a broad flight of stone stairs of over a dozen steps, the same stairs Amuro had seen in the photograph. The building was bordered by Himalayan cedar trees on a property facing a 4-lane highway. It was a typical colony office building. Amuro stopped an LA car borrowed from the Federation consulate in front of the agency's parking lot. He knew List was probably tailing him, suspecting him of being a new type, but he didn't even bother to turn around and check. List wasn't the type to blow his cover that easily. He gazed at the entrance to the building. It was long past normal closing time. 2 or 3 people emerged and walked over to their cars in the lot without paying any attention to him. Then, suddenly, he saw a female figure exit, dressed in a knee-length skirt that fluttered as she walked. It triggered an odd reaction in him. On the cassette of the 3rd, he had seen Kusko only in slacks. Her chestnut hair bounced off her shoulders as she skipped down the stairs and came over. "You wait long for me?" she asked. "Less than 30 minutes, he answered, turning the key in the ignition. She sat in the seat next to him, and he sensed the power of her presence. It was a warm sensation, and he liked it. He had planned to check his rearview mirror before pulling out, but he was so distracted by the sight of her hair that he forgot. To his surprise, she said, "Don't even bother. Someone will follow us anyway." He stepped on the LA car's accelerator and spun the car onto the highway in front of the agency. "Sorry," he said. "Sorry for what? Sorry to lie in wait for you here like this. I saw you through the glass doors of the building entrance. What were you doing?" "Lying in wait for you. I knew you'd come. I knew if you were at the consulate, you'd learn about this place. It's been 3 days, hasn't it? I knew you'd come. That's why I wore this skirt. Is this some sort of female intuition or what?" "Probably. I knew I'd never see you again if I suddenly had to go to Earth or relocate to the front lines. But I also knew if you were still on this colony, you'd come today." Kusko smiled happily as she said this, but Amuro sensed something else, something indicating that she was playing with him. Was it an illusion? He imagined her saying something like, "You really are kind of cute, aren't you?" Tensing slightly, he smiled back and said, "Mind if I ask you something else, Kusko?" "Sure, go right ahead. Are you using some special kind of psychology to figure out what I'm thinking?" "I don't know anything about psychology, but we've been interested in each other since we first met." "Hey, isn't that enough?" She didn't call him baby, but Amuro sensed that she wanted to. She was only a little older than he was, but something made her sound like she was talking down to him. What was it? He wondered. "No, I don't think you understand," he stammered, quickly regretting that he had ever come to meet her. "You really are kind of cute, aren't you?" she said, and then she giggled. Amuro stopped the LA car. Kusko stopped giggling and stared at him. He stared back at her gray eyes, and in his peripheral vision he noted her beautiful skin and the lines of her body. "Get out," he said. "But Kusko was at a loss for words. "Hey," Amuro said, "if you think I'm such a kid, I'm not the man for you. Get out." "Listen, Amuro, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it at all. I was just happy to see you. I apologize if I offended you. Well, don't be. I'm already taken. I already have a girlfriend, Frau Bao." I didn't realize," she stammered. "I'm really sorry." And then she got out of the car. "Sorry, Kusko," Amuro said as he punched the LA car accelerator to the floor. He didn't understand why he was so angry. In reality, he had hoped to eat dinner with her and even go dancing. It all could have happened, and it would have been even better if they could have slept together. He knew all he had to do was turn the LA car around. Just when he was thinking he should pull over to the side of the road, 2 LA cars passed him on the left. He straightened his steering wheel and drove straight ahead. In his rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of Kusko Al standing, still waiting. Then he saw her turn around and start walking the other way. "I've got to go back for her," he thought, knowing it was already too late. Why had he mentioned Frau Bo's name to her? He couldn't understand it himself. Frau had been his neighbor on Side 7, and now was a refugee on Luna 2. In spite of being younger than he was, she had always tried to mother him. She was more than his first love. She was almost like a sister. It was true she was waiting for him. He clearly remembered her telling him when they had parted. But he never should have blurted it out. Why had he let Frau get in the way? If he really took his mission seriously, he probably should have had more contact with Kusko Al. He tried as hard as he could to calm his mind, but found himself thinking things he had never thought of before. Why did I act that way? Kusko Al was right. One was interested in her. The day was over on Balda Bay, and darkness was slowly falling on the entire colony. The tail lamps on his LA car streaked through the night, and the street lights diffused into geometric patterns of light on either side as he passed them by. He cursed himself and stomped on the accelerator.